Hi, I'm Julieann Ash. I'm the director of Midwest Educational Therapy and Associates, and I wanted to share some ideas with you now about stress and a critical missing component, which is executive function. We all know with what's going on in the world today, there's more stress for adults, there's more stress for students, there's more stress, especially for young people. And what we want to do is take a look at some of the components that could really help you relieve some of that stress, or even more importantly, get ahead of it. So first off, what is stress? And it's emotional or physical tension. It can be created by thoughts, by feelings, by events. Some people say, oh, I'm so nervous, or I'm so exhausted, or I'm frightened, or I'm angry. That's all stress. It's basically your body's reaction to a key demand of some sort that's out of the ordinary. So what are some of our stressors? Faster paced work environments. Working from home when you have 3 little kids. I mean, that's a huge stressor. It can also be for our students where there's more demand to be able to absorb information faster. The information that's being presented on all levels of our society, whether it's in schools or in the workplace, is more informationally dense. So now, what does that mean? That just means you're asked to absorb more information, process it in less amount of time. Again, a big source of stress. Social media, social pressures, they're huge for our kids, for our young adults, even for adults that feel the pressure to keep up, to communicate, to stay on top of things 24/7. And that leads to enhanced perception of competition. Competition in the schools. You have to get into this fabulous university, and then you're supposed to go from there immediately to a wonderful career. Doesn't sound too realistic, but that's the perceived belief. In work, you have to be a perfect parent, a perfect partner, a perfect worker. Your career is important. But at the same time, that's all additional stress. So let's start out looking at that stress. Where does it hit? There's 2 key areas for it. The first is the amygdala. It's a small part of the brain located deep inside. It's an ancient part of the brain. It's part of what's called the limbic system, and it's connected to our ability to remember things. The other one is these prefrontal cortex, which is this part that does the planning, organization, and later on we're going to talk about it more as executive function. Okay, let's look at the amygdala first. Think of the amygdala as the bodyguard of your brain. In ancient times, somebody was walking along a pathway, noticed a different looking shadow. If you kind of stop to think about it, oh no, it was a tiger. Chomp, you're eaten. So the amygdala's job, in a very primitive sense, was to grab you, run away, not stop and think about it, but you're grab and gone. Okay, now, unfortunately, the amygdala can't tell the difference between a tiger and a test. To it, it's still a threat. And it only has 3 options. It's fight, flight, or freeze. And I'm sure everybody has had that backed into the corner, the stress is coming up, we're going to fight. Flight can also be avoidance, getting rid of something, getting out of it, getting away from, hoping it goes away. Really common with our students that are struggling with homework or understanding concepts or their own executive function. And finally, there's the freeze. And we've all had that when we've just locked up completely, just can't do anything. Or if you've ever taken a test And you've walked in and you've sat down and all of a sudden you just went blank. There's your amygdala. Your bodyguard perceived that test as a threat. The thing with the amygdala that makes it so difficult is it's a rapid instinctual response. It doesn't stop to remember. It doesn't stop to think. It just goes. So you're in the middle of the situation before you even realize how you got there. And the stress is through the roof. Okay, so how do we chill out the amygdala somewhat? Okay, one of the first ways is movement. The amygdala is designed to get you gone. Okay, it wants you out of that situation. So when we move, whether it's walking, biking, cycling, jumping on a trampoline, it all works as movement, and the body relaxes because you're actually doing what the amygdala wants you to do. Move, get away. The other key thing is when the amygdala is in control, your body's in that fight, flight, or freeze, and oftentimes, if you can even try it on yourself, you're going to feel your breath coming kind of like short and panting, and it's all really tense, or if you're getting really stressed. So when we shut that down by doing a breathing exercise, and I'll give you one in a minute, that tells the amygdala, oh, okay, the body is calming down. It triggers it to relax. The threat is over. One of the breathing exercises that we love to teach people is used a lot by first responders, and such as, EMTs, firefighters, policemen, and so forth. And we call it box breathing. And for box breathing, what you do is you inhale for 4 seconds, hold it for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, and then hold it for 4 seconds. And we teach our students to do 4 of 4. So then that way it can be done sitting at a stoplight. It can be done on a frustrating drive home. It could be done right before a test or during a test. It can be done at any time when you just feel yourself and your nervous system just kind of like starting to become overloaded. So that's the amygdala. But now, what about the prefrontal cortex? What is that? Well, this is the thinking and planning part of your brain. Okay, it's a lot newer in terms of development. The older parts of the brain are here. This is where we found our amygdala. Now this is our prefrontal. And a side note here for all of you parents and caretakers out there, that part of the brain doesn't mature until somebody is in their mid-20s. So it's one of the things where for our children especially, it's hard for them to use this part of the brain to help manage stress. It's just not well developed yet. You can think of this as the command and control center. And if you're not really mature for clear signals from command and control until 25, you can kind of see what we've got. This part of the brain helps manage the emotions, helps manage the amygdala, helps manage the emotions, and it also does something called the executive function. So how do we chill out the prefrontal cortex just like we chilled out the amygdala? Well, one of the first things we can do is change what I call the terrible day story. The terrible day story goes like this. Your child comes home from school, or your partner comes home from work, and you go, how was your day? And they go, horrible, terrible, it was awful. Well, in your child's case, you may go, well, how was first period? Oh, no problem. Second, yeah. Third, okay. How about lunch? Oh, yeah, I sat with my friends. And you go on through the afternoon. Yeah. Comes down to the end that they couldn't get their locker open and they were almost late for the bus. So that blew the whole day because they had a terrible story about how awful the day was. You can do the same thing with your partner, where you go through, how was your morning? Oh, pretty good. We had a great conference. We talked to a lot of people. Looks like that project's going through. Then you find out, like right towards the late afternoon, all of a sudden his supervisor or her supervisor dropped a huge project right in the middle of some critical timing for them. So now it becomes a terrible day. So one of the things you want to do with the terrible day story is change your scripts. So sure, we could say, oh, that's horrible that you got stuck with the locker for your child. What do you think you could do? Oh, well, I could have maybe gotten there a little earlier. Okay. How do you, I'm hearing you had a pretty good day. So what do you want to do for changing your scripts? Well, I guess I could say it was a pretty good day, except for getting stuck with the locker. That's right. Same thing with your partner. You can say, well, geez, it sounds like you had a pretty successful day up until that big project hit. And the script change might be, yeah, it was a good day. I'm a little concerned about this, but I've got my plan in place. I'm going to get out some project management software and get out to a couple of other people and get some help on this thing. So now it's no longer the terrible day. The stress levels are down. Okay. You're not, listen, some folks that are more visual will have actual horrible movies in their head. And in that case, you change the visualization. And you want to refute it a little bit with evidence. Because in the case of your child, they didn't miss the bus. And you might point out to them, hey, you did it. You didn't miss the bus. For your partner, you may say to her, wow, but you did a project just like this about a month ago. Oh, you're really good at these. Yeah. So kind of like starting to picture yourself, yeah, I'm more successful. And you also have specific targeted information that you can share with a person or with yourself if you're giving yourself a terrible day about how, wait a minute, it isn't a terrible day. It's a few things and I've got a plan to fix them. Okay. So the next piece we want to look at is executive function. This is a critical missing component because in the things we've been talking about, chilling out all requires planning and these executive functions. So what is executive function? It's the processes that are going to guide and direct. They manage cognitive, the thinking, they manage emotional and behavioral functions. Okay. So we like to consider the big three. And if you get a handle on the big three proactively, it's going to be less stress in your life. Kind of makes sense. And it's going to strengthen those executive functions when it's time to use them to help manage the stress. So again, what are the big three? Well, the first one's initiation, getting started, or more importantly, getting restarted when you're stuck. I mean, that is so key for people because a lot of folks can get started, but students, even young adults and adults, they hit a roadblock, they're stuck, they don't know what to do, they overload and shut down. Planning is a huge one. Knowing how to sequence something effectively. How do you prioritize it? Lay it out, break it up. Organization of materials. And by the way, this particular slide is of one of my students' actual rooms. This is a before. Unfortunately, his dad didn't send me an after picture, but it was really, it was a really cool before and after. Along with the organization material, time loops in with these all of these. Okay, so initiation. We begin a task or we generate the ideas for a task. And I think everybody knows what the issues are. You're kind of stalled out, frustrated. There's the stress, overwhelmed, flood, shut down. There's two main types. Some are neurological, and we see these a lot for some of our students with ADHD. We see it with our students with some difficulty with head injuries, concussions. And then there's also the ones that we see even more frequently is the anxiety-driven ones. So for the neurological-driven ones, you can think of it, there's no start button. This is where the brain literally has no idea where to get going. Some of the effective strategies that you can use for yourself or even your partner is writing directions. Make sure it's written so that the brain can see where to start. Bullet point them, not a whole bunch of verbiage. For if there's some sort of writing that needs to be done, because oftentimes initiation pops up in the writing, get some sort of template or outline, say for a lab report, or if you have to make a standard report at the office so that you have what I like to term, like lawyers call it, boilerplate, that will help you start and know where to put things. Models are huge. Models of a thesis for students, written samples, the dreaded works cited, and also any kind of apps that are going to help do that automatically for you, such as citationmachine.net or EasyBib. Practice finding out the most important information before you get into a social situation. So for a student or an adolescent, it might be thinking about, how do I start a conversation? How do I be careful I don't interrupt? How do I keep track of it? For someone in the business world, doing a little bit of a script before you're going into your meeting, before you're working with your immediate supervisor. The anxiety-driven ones are a little bit different. The anxiety-driven ones relate more to our amygdala. And in this case, you're looking to decrease the perceived overload. And in this case, what you want to do is separate a syllabus or a grouping of tasks into smaller chunks, very small chunks, so that it doesn't look overwhelming. Timeline or sample calendars, you want to make time visual. For a lot of individuals, especially those that are more creative or a little bit more associative thinking, time is a little bit optional, and it's very easy to feel like everything is due right now. Now, in some cases it is, but if you can make time visual, it'll give you a better sense of, no, you would just have this chunk to do. In a school setting, it's really nice to have an opportunity to redo. This is why we encourage our students to get things done a little bit ahead of time if we can, such as a paper, get it back to the teacher or a professor in college, get a little chance to redo. In the work world, what you can do is also try to get things done. It's sometimes really hard, a little bit ahead of time. Run it by somebody else, run it by a peer, run it by your supervisor. Try to get a chance to redo, to take your own pressure off. And again, positive problem solving. Everybody looks for problems. And you know what? If you look for problems, you're going to find them. So remember we were going to change our script for the terrible day. Let's change our script again for the initiation. So think about what helped on a project like this before? What do I think is blocking me now? So here, you're taking out that level of stress that beats yourself up. I can't get started. This is all terrible. But instead, we're replacing it with, what's helped in the past? Why was I successful? What's blocking me now? And how can I use what I had in the past and go across to be more successful now? It's a great technique for any age. The second one of the big three is planning. That's anticipating the future is part of this. It's a sequencing, breaking things down. It helps us set goals and that step-by-step approach to tasks. I'm sure everybody's heard that sentence, it's now? Or, by the way, Mom, I have a project that's due on Monday, and it's Sunday night, and you have to go buy things. Okay, totally. So we ask ourselves, what's happening there? And in this case, the executive function area around planning isn't as robust. Okay, so we did a little research, and Dr. Russell Barkley talks about a time event horizon. And Dr. Barkley is one of our foremost ADHD researchers here in the US. And this time event horizon that he's describing is a perception of time passing and the sequencing that goes along with it. And so you kind of look at the past and you look forward into the future, break things up, lay them out. Well, unfortunately, for those of us that have a little executive function problems or who are really stressed or are really loaded, you end up in an eternal now. It's just right now. Everything is immediate. And that contributes to the overload. So, some effective strategies. I can't emphasize it enough. Make time visual. Especially if you happen to be a little bit more language-based yourself, love reading, understand things best by talking, still making time visual will be helpful just to watch your sequencing. So visual calendars, color coding on a website, again for planning to help you with that sequencing, electronic reminders, cell phones, smartwatches that can be set for time intervals, email or text yourself, when you have planning reminders. And one thing that we teach is what we call a personal time multiplier. Sounds kind of strange, but what this is take a task that you routinely have to do. Estimate how long it's going to take you to do that task, and then time yourself to see how close you were. Do this over a period of a week with several common tasks, and look at how much you vary from your estimate to the actual. Now, when we're looking at this, a lot of our folks figure out that they routinely will under or overestimate. And one of my favorites is one of my young high school students who was definitely going to be an engineer. So he tracked all of his homework for 2 weeks so he would have enough data. And he calculated the difference. And he found out it was like 2.37 was his differential. So anytime he made a guess, he multiplied it by that, and he would be pretty accurate as to how long something was going to take him. So you're asking me, well, why is that important? And even my young engineer acknowledged later that if you think about a task that takes 15 minutes, okay, and you say, oh, that's going to just take me 10 minutes, and it takes you 15, you feel stressed because it's taking you 5 minutes more than you thought. But if you say, oh, I'm going to double that, and I'll give myself 20 minutes, and it takes you 10 minutes, okay, now you're looking at it, and you're going, oh, hey, that's good. The task still took the same amount of time, but it's your perception that changed. So I personally use a 2 time multiplier. In other words, if I think it's going to be 15 minutes, I give myself a half an hour. And if it's 20 minutes, I feel good. I feel successful. As opposed to the way I used to do it, where I was always chronically late. So the last one is our organization of kind of like materials and time. And it's keeping our workspaces orderly, materials. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean it's all going to be filed in a certain way. Some more associative brain styles like to group things and work by processes. So for example, students that I see on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, versus alphabetizing everybody by their last name. Either way is good, but it needs to be consistent. So the issues, if we don't do that, is I just had it. And oh boy, have you ever had the frustration of like, oh, I just laid this down. So we really need to work on our organization. And along with that is our organization of time. So if we have a space for everything, and everything's kind of laid out, And for our students, especially if they're working from home, if you make what we call an education station, where they can have nice lighting and a good chair and shelves and uh, places to put their things, or baskets if they prefer it that way. You might like to make your own workstations if you're working from home. That simplifies and decreases the anxiety. But now, time management. How do we prioritize that time? So this matrix helps us. So the first step is you list your tasks that you have to do beside the matrix. Don't make it huge. I mean, we're not going to do the next month's. Just do that day or that week. The matrix is designed so across the top are time-based. Urgent is defined from something that's done in a half an hour to 48 hours. Less urgent is 24 hours to a week. The y-axis, or the vertical axis, is how it impacts you, from where it's more important, more impact, to less impact. So now we have 4 quadrants. The first quadrant, it's important and urgent, so that would be our first pass. The next one is important but less urgent. And of course, obviously things are going to move through these squares as you do them. The bottom on the left will be urgent but less important. And then finally you have not urgent and not important. One of the key differentials that you have to be very aware of is most people confuse urgent with important. It's not the same. Urgent is time. That's all that is. When you're talking about importance, it's your impact on you. How important is this? We see this chronically with students that say, oh, I've got a 3-point homework due tomorrow. I better get this done. And they run out of time to study for a 50-point test that's the day after. So, and it's again, we see this for adults when they're arranging their projects or when they're arranging their work tasks is, oh, it's due tomorrow. So it goes to the top of the list, even though the impact is quite a bit lower. And what's missing are the things in the time, the a little bit 24 hours to a week, but very high impact. Ends up in a scramble. Once you get your matrix filled out, go ahead and lay it out on some sort of calendar or reminder system that just kind of helps track this for you. Okay, so there's been some techniques to give you a hand with the amygdala, chilling out your amygdala, chilling out your executive functions. We've talked a little bit about getting ahead and strengthening those executive functions to help you enhance your performance. Okay. One thing we have for you is on our website, we have a coloring book that talks about anxiety, and we call it Color Yourself to Calm. You can go onto the website, www.metaoh.org, and download a free copy. And I encourage you to find your favorite path to calm. Thank you, and it was lovely speaking with all of you.